Sup, guys? It's Toad back with you. As always, morning show, Friday, Valentine's Day, Friday the 14th. At least it's not Friday the 13th, but the gambling gods love me so much that for Valentine's Day, they're giving me so much love that it's the entire card tonight is the sport that's given me the biggest problems this year, which is college basketball. So isn't that awesome? I've been fine. NBA, NHL, those have been pretty good. College basketball killing me. Nope, here you go. It's college basketball alone, even though I actually love these days because I love college basketball, and it kind of helps me focus a little bit more, I think. I don't know. So NBA has gone into the All-Star break, which I hate those festivities at this point. NHL is in theirs, which is like a prolonged one now with the Four Nations tournament, which resumes with more games tomorrow, I think. U.S. with a blowout win last night, although they scored 4 goals in the third period. But still, I was right. I told you they were going to win and cover whatever the puck line was, which they did. So, 1-0 for me last night. I feel like maybe I should have played more games than I did. I was right about, I think, more than half of the NBA card. I wasn't right about Houston, but that one was kind of iffy. Well, they were all iffy enough that I didn't play any of them, of course. But I kind of wish I played the T-Wolves. That was an easy win, just a weird spot for the Thunder. Like when teams are just kind of doing fairly well, and they have to go on a back-to-back out on the road for a final game right before going into the All-Star break, it's kind of a weird spot. So the teams that were in that type of spot last night, I think, did not do well. The T-Wolves took advantage of it. And I think, did Utah win as well? I think they were hosting some team that was in that spot. The Clippers, I think. I don't remember who won that game, though. I think Clippers won and didn't cover. Whatever. My one play was a winner on Hofstra, which I said was at plus 1.5 on the show yesterday. But again, take those lines with a little bit of a grain of salt, obviously, and go look yourself to see what the best number is that you can get. Because I went out there on the line. I knew the line was moving up a little bit, so I hadn't played it yet. And, like, right after the show ended, I looked and it was at like 2.5. I'm like, all right. Is it going to get to 3? I don't think it did. I wound up on the 2.5. They covered all those numbers. They lost by 1. So it was a pretty close game pretty much the whole way. I'll take it. I'd rather have the money line cash. It's pretty likely when you have a plus 2.5 and they cover, but whatever. This is why when you play the favorite, as I mentioned the other day, which is something I've started doing, and I have one play again that is a favorite money line like this. If you have a small favorite in college basketball that's 1.5, or 2, it's actually more advantageous to play the money line up to about minus 130 than to lay the points. It actually works out a little bit more in your favor more often, and that actually wound up being the case with who was Hofstra even playing last night? With whoever Hofstra's opponent was last night, William and Mary, I think. They hit on the money line, obviously, but didn't cover any of the spread numbers. All right, let's get into today, man. It's all college basketball. You know you're going to have Ivy on Friday nights. A lot of Ivy League action. Columbia is at Dartmouth. Columbia finally got their first win in Ivy League play. They're rolling in out-of-conference play, and I said, man, this is like probably one of the most overrated teams I've ever seen. And then they start conference play, and see you later. We're going to lose every game in conference. 6 losses in a row to start conference play, and then they finally beat Brown, which might actually give them a little bit of momentum coming into this game against Dartmouth, kid. And Dartmouth beat Columbia at Columbia when Columbia was actually a favorite at home of 3.5. So Columbia not very good if the odds makers are telling you they're basically as bad as Dartmouth is. But still, I think this is a spot where if you want to play this game, you actually come in and take Columbia here because it's one of those really quick turnaround road revenge games. And in between the two, Columbia was able to break that loss streak and finally get that monkey off their back and get a win. And that can kind of give you some form of relief, really, and then let you kind of just play looser coming out of that. And again, they're going on the road to face Dartmouth, who beat them on their home floor when they were favored the game before that. So I would play Columbia in this game or leave the game alone, which I'm leaving it alone, but Columbia would be the side I would look for. Dartmouth is up from 1.5 to 2, which I don't agree with that. And that line doesn't really totally coincide with Columbia being a 3.5 point favorite, though. I guess it almost seems like Dartmouth should actually be maybe closer to 3, but I don't even know how much home advantage they really have. So I don't know. Dartmouth is coming off a fairly big win after that Columbia game. They beat Harvard in between there. And Harvard, they're not good this year, but they've been one of the better teams in this conference more often than they haven't. So I don't know. I don't know what to think about that. Next up, I have 4 plays, by the way. Just bear with me in college basketball because I can't help myself. And I actually kind of like the last 2 plays I'm going to talk about best, but I couldn't keep myself off of these. So Loyola-Chicago minus 2.5 is the first play. This one I won't go money line on because it's at that 2.5 threshold. If it does drop to 2, maybe you can look that way. But this line has moved up a little bit, so I don't think that it will. It's going up from 2.5 to 2.5 with juice. Right now, I like the spot to fade St. Louis in the spot. This is actually a first meeting between the two as they're going to play again in a couple games. I think St. Louis is in a difficult spot, man. I faded them in this second road game in a row against St. Joe's because of the just run of games that they had leading up to that and the travel spot. I hit on St. Joe's in that game, and then they came off of that. And they tried to have a bounce back spot, but in this last game, they played George Mason, who's only got 1 loss in the A-10, sitting atop the A-10, although, as I keep telling you, VCU is actually the better team over George Mason, but we'll get to that when we get to it, which is not tonight. St. Louis, they played George Mason really tough, and this game went into overtime, and they wound up losing the game by 2 in overtime against George Mason. So if you're St. Louis, you play a huge game like this, I don't know how you get back up off the mat after that and turn around and go to Loyola-Chicago. I think it's a difficult spot for them. And not only that, but St. Louis was losing almost this entire game. George Mason was winning basically the whole game. They had leads by double digits a couple of times. St. Louis was down double digits with 10 minutes to go, basically. And then they came all the way back, sent it into overtime. Actually, they had to retie the game twice. I think they never took the lead, kept falling behind. They were again down 7 with 2 minutes left. So they had to make like 3 different comebacks in this game just to send it into overtime, which they did on a 3-pointer at the buzzer, basically, that sent it into overtime. And then George Mason took the lead in overtime as well, almost immediately, and kept the lead. And then St. Louis almost pulled back to within the number again, or pulled back to a tie again. They got to within 1 again in overtime. So it was just repeated comebacks from St. Louis, just furious comebacks. This is the type of game that can really take a lot out of you, man, just for so many reasons. Just because it was constant efforts to come back in the game. It goes into overtime. Just the emotional roller coaster that is. I hate the spot for St. Louis here. The spot is much better for Loyola-Chicago, and they played into overtime as well in their last game. But in this game, it was the second road game in a row for them. They lost to Duquesne pretty badly in the game before that, but wasn't a very good spot for them. A second straight road game going to face the worst team in the conference, Richmond, and that went into overtime. They were able to win the game in overtime, but still, it was a close call as a 4.5-point road favorite. But Loyola-Chicago was winning this game the entire way. They were winning by 12 with 10 minutes left. So this is almost like the inverse of St. Louis's game. This is why I'm playing this game, dude, because you don't see stuff like this often at all, where you have St. Louis had to repeatedly come back. They were losing the whole game against the top team in the conference. Had to come back repeatedly, came back from a double-digit deficit, sent it into overtime only to still lose, whereas Loyola-Chicago was on the inverse side of that against the bottom team in the conference. They had the big lead, the double-digit lead, and they let that bottom team come all the way back and tie them. So Richmond was kind of in the St. Louis role here. And then Loyola-Chicago was able to finally get back into the lead and pull away in overtime. And I think Richmond actually pulled into the lead. Yeah, they actually had the lead with less than a minute to go. So this was a scare for Loyola-Chicago. So whereas St. Louis is coming off, yes, both games are big efforts in a way, but St. Louis is coming off such letdown after they almost had that big win. I think that puts them in a hangover spot. Whereas Loyola-Chicago is basically coming off an escape. So I think you're going to see them actually be motivated to play a lot better in this game. So I'm on Loyola-Chicago for all those reasons. And as far as Ken Palm is concerned, I mean, he does have St. Louis as the better team slightly. Not by a whole lot. But St. Louis, I don't even really know what else to say, man. I mean, they're a decent team basically all across the board in their metrics. They're just okay. Loyola-Chicago's down here at 136, so they're almost 20 ranking spots lower. Loyola-Chicago plays a little bit slower. They're a little bit higher in the luck index. I don't think any of that matters really. Both teams are pretty similar defensively. Loyola-Chicago is a little bit worse offensively. So, again, the KenPom numbers don't really tell you a whole lot about this game. Although Loyola-Chicago may play more of a actually, I was going to say they may slow the game down a little bit more, but both teams kind of play a similar tempo, too, like a slow-ish tempo. So really not much you can glean from KenPom there. So we're going with the situation in that one. Yes, Scott, what's up, man? Furious comebacks, yes. Coming on the back, yes. Go watch Tower Gang to hear that take place in a particular story. Okay. What else did I want to talk about here? Yale, to me, seems like they're in kind of a bad spot, but they're just such a massive favorite here. I don't want to touch this game. They just beat Cornell in a third straight road game. They somehow beat Cornell, and in the middle there, they'd beaten Penn in between Princeton and Cornell. Now they're in between Princeton and Cornell again. They're playing Penn again, but now they beat Penn by almost 30 on the road, turned around, beat Cornell, and scored over 100 points, and Cornell is maybe the second best team in the conference now. It's either Cornell or Princeton. Those two teams are the two teams that can really compete with Yale, basically. Yale pulled off that big win. Now they're coming back home off of all that, and they play Penn again, who they already beat by 30 on the road. And then who do they have up next? Oh, yeah, Princeton and Cornell again. So this definitely looks like a sandwich to me, but Yale is just way better than Penn, so I don't even know, man. They are down from 18 to 17.5. I wouldn't lay the points with Yale, obviously. That's what I'll say about that game. But, man, that is just kind of a crazy spot there. And Princeton at Brown. I mean, Princeton, they have Yale up next, so it could be a little bit of a look ahead. But then again, they just barely got by Penn. So those results might come into play when they face Yale, man, because it's like if Yale kills Penn twice and Princeton barely beat Penn, people are going to look at this and think, oh, my God, Yale's going to crush Princeton, but maybe that actually won't be the case. Princeton is going to be in a road revenge spot coming up against Yale, so keep that in mind when we get to that. Ohio and Kent State, I mean, this should be a decent game in the MAC here. Ohio already won the first matchup on their home floor by 2, so now it is revenge for Kent State, but not road revenge, so I don't know what to expect in this game, really. Kent State is a 5.5-point favorite there, so they are the better team. Next one of my plays. This is one of those ones where you look at the records of these teams and think, what is this line? Siena, -2.5 is the next play up. Again, you look at these teams' records. Marist has a way better record, both overall and in conference. They're 16-5 overall. Siena's below 500 overall and in conference. So you're looking at this and thinking, how is Marist getting points here? It looks so easy to take the points with Marist. It almost looks like the books are just begging you to play Marist. Like, here you go, man. It looks like free money. Play Marist. And I'm going to go ahead and tell you that that is not the right way to look at this game. As I always tell you, you know how I do this if you watch me. Siena's already up from 1.5 to 2.5, so I could have gotten a lower price, a money line price on this, but I only saw it at 2.5 everywhere, and I'm fine with that. I'll just lay the points here. Marist, again, I think they're overrated. I mean, they kind of did this last year, too. I think Marist was a little bit overrated last year as well. Where they kind of came from out of nowhere. They were one of the worst teams in this conference for as long as I can remember in the MAC, and then they started playing a lot better. But I think it's a little bit of a mirage. As you'll see with KenPom's luck rankings, I think it's again a mirage. Marist already beat Siena at home by 5, so that might cause them to overlook Siena a little bit more here. And I think they're in a big-time sandwich spot as they're kind of zigzagging all over the place, too, even though it's not like they're traveling that far. They went to Fairfield, Connecticut. Marist is located outside of New York City, I believe, like a bit north of New York City. So not far travel for any of these, really, but still. They went to Fairfield, and they lost the game at Fairfield as like a 6-point favorite or something on a 3/4 court shot, which I'm kind of mad I didn't fade Fairfield after that because I think Fairfield lost their next game after that. I mean, how do you beat Marist like that if you're Fairfield, a pretty bad team, and you do that in front of your home court? Let's play it, actually. Why not? Can we see this on my screen? I don't know if we have the audio or not. Probably not, but this is crazy, dude. I mean, they just fling it up in a tie game. It looked like it was going to go into overtime. and you get Fairfield. Yeah, I don't know. They might have stormed the court, actually, because that was just such a ridiculous. Yeah, there was a court storm in there. So I should have been paying more attention to that, even though beating Marist, I mean, Marist, they were one of the teams to top the conference, so it was a big win for that Fairfield program. It was a revenge spot as well. I'm going on too much about this game, but again, that was that dramatic loss for Marist there. Fairfield was definitely in a fade spot after that, which I should have caught, but whatever. Then Marist turned around, and they had to play Iona, and as I've been preaching all year, I've played on Iona a couple times this year. Iona is better than you think. They had a difficult out-of-conference schedule. They're below 500 because of that, but they're doing pretty well in conference play, and they're in the mix to potentially compete to try to win this conference, man. It seems like they're always there. Iona wins this conference like a decent amount recently, going back to they actually had Rick Pitino, I believe, as their coach for a while, though we know now he's at Louisville, but when he was there, they were a pretty good program, and they are still pretty good right now. I've been saying that. So that Marist-Iona game, that was a pretty big game, dude. And Iona was able to beat them on their home floor by 4 in a pretty tough game. So now Marist is coming off that, and they have to go back out on the road and face the Siena team they already beat off of 2 tough games, kind of a crushing loss. And then that Iona game is just a big game, in my opinion. And then up next, they got Merrimack, who is one of the threats to beat them in this conference. Merrimack is actually atop the conference right now. If you see my bracketology, I actually have them winning this conference right now, although it is close. I think Merrimack, Quinnipiac, and Iona, I think it's going to be one of those 3 teams, in my opinion, will wind up winning this conference. But, I mean, we'll see when we get to the conference tournament, because this is a bad conference, and really, you could see one of these lesser teams just steal the conference away and get to play in the first 4 in Dayton, Ohio, baby, and then get annihilated by a 1 seed. Won't that be great? But this is a bad spot, in my opinion. I think it's a sandwich spot. It is a little bit of a revenge spot for Siena. Siena's coming off a bad game where they lost to Rider on the road, but I think Siena was a road favorite here. Yeah, Rider sucks. So we'll be talking about Rider in a little bit. Yeah, they suck, but they may be in a spot where you might want to take them here. So Siena's coming off that. I do think they're going to be focused for Marist. I mean, Marist is one of the top teams in the conference, and this is also kind of a battle between a couple of programs that are outside of New York City, and Siena was the bigger of the 2 dogs for a while. We remember Siena was making the tournament a couple years in a row there, and as I have said, I forget who the coach was then. It's some decently known coach was there then, who's at some bigger program now. So he did well at Siena and had that Siena team running up and down the floor. It was crazy, man. I had them winning a game against Vandy in my bracket way back in 2008 during one of those years. Got that one right, by the way. I don't remember if I bet that one or not, but that was a decent spot to play Siena, in my opinion. Nobody was paying any attention to them as a 13 seed, and then they were really in the mix the next year and almost beat Ohio State, if I remember correctly, in a 1 versus 8, or no, 9 versus 8, I think, matchup against Ohio State. Anyway, I'm too autistic about this, man. I remember way too much about all these tournaments. Anyway, Siena's coming off a pretty ugly loss to a bad Rider team. Maybe they were looking ahead to this. I think this is a spot where you're going to get focus out of Siena. And as I said, we'll look at KenPom. He's got Marist as the 48th luckiest team in the entire country. So he has them way overrated right now. And he has them as having faced the 2nd or 3rd weakest schedule in the entire country at 364. So they face an unbelievably weak schedule. They're 302nd in offensive efficiency. So they play decent defense, but their offense is very bad at times. And they play fast. So again, it's one of those weird situations with a fast-paced team that can't score, which is, I mean, I don't know what that mix really is, but then you got Siena not that far down from them, only 10 spots lower in KenPom's rankings. He's got them actually as being undervalued. He has them at 224th in luck, so there's a big luck discrepancy in KenPom's ratings here. They play slow, but not as slow as Marist, so Siena, we remember them running back in the day. They might actually try to speed this game up a little bit because Marist likes to play even significantly slower than they do. And then Siena at least does have the better offense, I guess. So I just said Marist is a fast-paced team. I misspoke. They're a slow-paced team that can't score, so that does make sense. Excuse me. I was looking at the luck index. They're very high in the luck index. Slow-paced team, very slow-paced team, which does make sense with being a better defensive than offensive team. That's the more typical mix that you get. And then Siena, yeah, they're actually better offensively than Marist, but worse defensively. So usually I like to be on the better defensive team, especially Marist being the better defensive team, getting points. But in a spot like this, I don't like it, obviously. I think this is a spot where you play Siena or you just don't play the game. I'm playing Siena. I think it's, again, like a misleading spread. You get a good situation to fade Marist. And again, I don't think the matchup is that much of a concern. So we'll do that. And then also looking at this conference, we got Iona hosting Rider, and I told you, man, I'm taking Rider +7 here. I don't know if the 7s are still out there. They were a little while ago. It's 7 or 6.5. I would probably still play it. It's down from 7 to 6.5 with juice at some places. Probably means there are still 7s out there. Iona, they just beat Marist, like I said, and that was a second straight road game. They'd beaten Mount St. Mary's the game before that, who is a pretty decent team as well in this conference. So 2 pretty nice wins for Iona, and they're really starting to kind of turn it on. They're clicking. They've won 6 of their last 7 games to really vault up the rankings in this conference, and I told you they were going to be there. But now they get Rider, who they already beat on the road by 6 points. So Rider did play competitively against them, but that means they may very well overlook Rider, man, because if you beat a team on their own floor, how do you really get up and pay that much attention to them on your own floor after you already pulled off these other big wins ahead of it? And who do they have up next? They got Quinnipiac up next, man, and they have Merrimack 2 games after that with a revenge game against Manhattan in between the two because they actually lost at Manhattan. That was their only loss in that entire stretch. So all 3 of these upcoming games are bigger for them than this Rider game. So I think they might overlook Rider in this spot, man. Even though Rider sucks, this is a game where I think it makes sense to play Rider. Rider having to go up to Iona to play this one, which is, I believe, outside of the New York City area. It might be upstate New York, actually. I forget. Rider is based out of New Jersey, but, I mean, none of it really matters. I mean, not a whole lot of travel going on in the MAAC conference. They're basically all in New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, tri-state area there. Rider just got that win over Siena. I think that's actually a good win for them because it'll just break that losing momentum that they have and give them some confidence. And after they got their previous win where they beat St. Peter's to break that loss streak, although they lost to Iona and Quinnipiac, I mean, not going to blame them for those losses. After that St. Peter's win where they started turning it around, they turned around and played really well against Merrimack and played them to within 2, so had a decent performance against one of the top teams in the conference. That's a good sign that they're playing competitively against some of these better teams. They've really done pretty well, actually, for the most part in conference play. This loss at Canisius is terrible. I mean, that is by far the worst loss. Canisius is awful. But other than that, they've actually done fairly well for a team that isn't very good. And now I think they're going to be in a spot where I do think they're going to be focused on Iona because Iona is one of the teams that came into their place and beat them on their own floor. So I like it. Rider +7 is going to be the play in that one. I'm looking at the KenPom numbers real quick here because we really don't have that much to look at here. Iona likes to play fast. They're in the top 100 in tempo. They're the team that plays a fast tempo and really struggles offensively in like the bottom 30 in offensive efficiency. So Iona plays fast, but they can't score, which is a very weird mix. They're okay defensively. They are up in luck index. They're kind of high, although I think who are we looking at here? Rider. Rider is also really bad, though, down in the bottom, like 30 or 40 teams. They're actually really high in luck index, which I don't love, meaning that they've actually overperformed, but they play really slow. So I think even though it is going to be at Iona, Iona's going to try to speed the game up, but Iona can't score. Rider is actually above them in offensive efficiency. So you're looking at Iona being the team that actually has the better defense, and Rider is going to try to slow the pace down a little bit when they have the ball. So that weird mix there where Iona is not very good at scoring and Rider might be able to try to slow the game down a little bit, even though they're on the road. That is more conducive to the underdog being able to cover. So I think that makes sense as well, plus the bad spot that Iona's in. I'm going to grab the points with Rider, and then we'll finish it off talking about we do have one big conference game, and I'm on this one too. I'm on UCLA money line. I told you I was on a money line favorite. That's it at -125. It looks like the money is coming in on UCLA. Actually, maybe not. They were up from 1.5. It looked like they were up from 1.5 to 2 for a little while. Now they're down from 1.5 to 1.5 with reduced juice. So maybe you can get a better money line on this, but this is a fade of Indiana, man. I think Indiana is really ripe to fade here, even though I know UCLA going to an unfamiliar venue. It's not easy to play at Indiana. I understand all that, but this Indiana team is not that powerhouse team that, they're not what the program is used to, let's say. UCLA, sure, it's an unfamiliar venue, but they're not having to travel that far because they're already out in the Midwest. They just played at Illinois. Yes, that was a big game. Yes, they actually covered the line in that game and lost by 5 and played a pretty competitive game, kind of, but Illinois really just had the upper hand all game. And I had mentioned I actually liked Illinois in this game, and kind of surprising they didn't cover. Illinois was way up. They were up 16 with 4 minutes to go, basically, and then they didn't even score. Indiana went on like a 14-0 run or something to cut it, or 13-0 run to cut it to 3, which is crazy. Illinois just completely stalled out. But this game was played at Illinois' pace. Illinois likes to play fast. UCLA doesn't. And yes, I know Indiana also likes to play fast, but they're not Illinois. Indiana's a worse team than Illinois. Yes, I know a second straight road game is difficult, but I think the spot that Indiana is in is significantly worse. Indiana is in a major sandwich spot if this would come up. Indiana just pulled off their win of the year, man. They pulled off, they have a couple of really competitive games in a row. They actually played competitively against Purdue and then blew the game against Purdue. And before that, they blew the game against Maryland, too. I was actually on Indiana in that game against Maryland. And they blew the game, so they could have won the game. Then they almost upset Purdue, and they blew that lead as well. They covered both those games. Then they turned around, second straight road game. So the reason why they lost this game as badly as they did, I actually laid the points with Wisconsin in this game because I thought it was a really bad spot for Indiana coming off that back-to-back huge performances. And yeah, they didn't do well against Wisconsin. Then they turned around. I've played multiple of these games. I've been in tune with Indiana for the most part. I came and I played Indiana +3. I know I got away with the push on that one as Indiana hit a half-court shot at the buzzer that didn't even matter to cut it back to 3 in that game. Yes, I know, to push for me against Michigan. But that was another competitive game. So they've been playing all these competitive games, man. And then what do they do in their most recent game? Shockingly, because before the Michigan game, Mike Woodson announced that he's stepping down at the end of the year, which I didn't know how that was going to affect the team, although I actually thought it might kind of light a fire under the team for the game against Michigan. And they did play well. But then you got to be thinking that after that game, Woodson didn't even talk to the press, dude. They wanted to ask him about his the fact that he was resigning, and he refused to even talk to the press. And even Dusty May, I mentioned this on my show, Michigan's coach did answer questions about it, which is weird. It's not a good look. And then Indiana turned around and somehow went in and won on the road as double-digit underdogs against Michigan State, which makes no sense except for the fact that Michigan State, their previous win to this, I believe, was a pretty huge win because it was the win that gave Tom Izzo, I think it put him in a tie for the coach with the most wins at a single program ever or something like that. Is that right? Or in the Big Ten, I think it was, because he tied Bobby Knight. That's what it says here. Yeah, so Bobby Knight, we know he was in Indiana for a long time. So Bobby Knight was the winningest Big Ten coach in history, and Tom Izzo tied his amount of wins with that win over Oregon. So that was a big win for them. So maybe they were in a little bit of a letdown spot. Maybe they weren't totally paying attention to this Indiana team. It's been kind of a mess. They had Illinois, Purdue, Michigan, Maryland, Wisconsin all up next. So maybe they were looking past Indiana. Maybe. Those would be my thoughts, at least. Indiana, again, they were winning this whole game. I don't know how they did this. This is a great performance out of Indiana in this game against a very good Michigan State team. I don't know how they did it, but now they're coming off of that, and they have to turn around and play again. And they got Purdue up next, which I know it's not for 9 days, but still, that's their next game. I think it's a major letdown spot and maybe a sandwich spot. I actually prefer UCLA here. And Indiana, hilariously, actually, their travel is basically about the same as UCLA's is here, going from Michigan back down to Indiana, and UCLA's coming in from Illinois. So I'm going to play UCLA here. And yes, I know Indiana does like to speed the game up. Indiana plays really, really slow. No, I don't want to bring up the SSH keys and crap. All right, Indiana, yeah. They play 127th in tempo, so they play fairly fast. Yes, they're up there in luck. I know they're overrated. They're still, they're a competitive enough team, sure, but I don't know, 65th in defense, that's not, or 65th in offense, 48th in defense. You look at UCLA. UCLA is the way better defensive team. They're actually better on both sides of the court. UCLA, KenPom has them ranked like almost 30 spots higher than than Indiana. As the odds makers are telling you, UCLA is the better team. They're both unranked right now, so people might think, oh, Indiana just beat Michigan State. Of course they'll be able to beat this unranked UCLA team, right? And looking at the records actually don't look that different, where it's like, oh, maybe Indiana is like a live home underdog here. But again, I don't really think so. UCLA is definitely the better team. They're the way better defensive team at 12th in the nation. They're actually better offensively as well. Their luck index is a little bit better than Indiana's as well, not as high in the luck index. And they play very, very slow, I know, 313th in tempo, so they're going to try to slow the game down. They weren't able to do it against Illinois. Indiana, again, they're not as good as Illinois. Indiana doesn't play as fast as Illinois does either, so I think it may be easier for UCLA to get this game into a half-court style game where they want it here, because Indiana, they will try to speed it up, but they're not as good at doing it. So for those reasons, yeah, I mean, especially the spot that Indiana's in, I'm going to be on UCLA, and I think that'll do it. I will point out in this game, Nevada at San Jose State. San Jose State's coming off a big performance against San Diego State, and that might leave them hung over a little bit. They almost beat San Diego State, man, only losing to them by 3. It was a close game down the stretch. So I would not want to be on San Jose State coming off that big performance. And San Jose State's 2 best scorers have both been injured. So I think they actually both might have not played in this game, and they still somehow did that. I don't know. But I would not trust them with those guys out. They might be back in this game, though. I don't know. They both have injuries that make them like questionable. They do have Utah State coming up next. I don't think they're going to overlook Nevada. Nevada beat them by double digits in Reno back earlier this season. Nevada does have a revenge game against Colorado State up next. So maybe they'll be looking ahead to that and overlook San Jose State. So really, I don't think it's a great... It seems like it's not a great spot for Nevada to be totally focused, and it seems like it's a spot where San Jose State might be a bit fatigued at this point. So this game, I don't know what I would do with it. Nevada's up from 5 to 6.5 with juice, so it does look like some money may have come in on Nevada, but then again, it might be because of San Jose State's injury situation. So you got to pay attention to what's going on with that game. That's not a game I'm going to be playing. A lot of question marks there. That's going to do it for me, baby. I got 4 college basketball plays. Usually I have 1, maybe 2 on Friday with the short card, but short slate, short board, I should say. I keep saying card instead of board. I apologize. I also misspoke in my Super Bowl show, and I said a trend when I should have said an angle, because it's an angle if it's league-wide, and it's a trend if it's the same player or team doing something. So my apologies to all the people that get really autistic about that. Anyway, my plays, my card for college basketball tonight is Loyola-Chicago -2.5, Siena -2.5, Rider +7. We're going all over this MAAC and UCLA money line at -125. That's going to do it for me. Tower Gang Tone on Twitter. Follow the Tower Gang podcast. Patreon.com/Tower Gang. We are now paywalling the most recent episode for a week now, so you can still catch it live. So you got to catch it live on Wednesday night at 9:11 p.m. and get in the chat with us, man. If you're a free viewer, catch it live. And then if you can't, you'll be able to see it in a week. That's how we're doing it. And I don't know what we're going to do with the other Patreon content, but we do have a ton of Patreon content. So we have live pre-show and post-show. You get that, and you get to join a Telegram with us if you're Patreon. So all of that is there. And you get to see, if you miss the show on Wednesday, you get to watch that show whenever you want, basically, once it's out, as opposed to waiting a week now. So that's how it's going to work as we go forward. In Patreon, you do have access to a Patreon-specific Spotify stream as well that has the bonus content in it as well. So that's going to do it for me. Happy Friday, everybody. Happy Valentine's Day. Hopefully this college basketball card here shows me some love tonight. We'll see what happens. Maybe they'll leave me out in the cold. I will be at Tom Segura tonight myself, though, so I'll be laughing regardless. I'll be laughing, and then I'll get home and see what these results are, and then probably commit suicide or something. That's going to do it. I am Toad, once again, Tower Gang Toad. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Scott, for hanging out, being the only one, baby, on a Friday morning. Peace out.